As a black person growing up in the South, it would have been extremely difficult for me to have been unaware of the oppression around me. It was everywhere I turned. I spoke earlier about friends of mine having fallen in the struggle. Even at that time, some young girls who were very close to me and my family were killed in a church bombing. And then, of course, what I saw around me, I saw black people resisting. There's this myth that black people did not resist until Watts or until Malcolm or until the Black Panther Party. It's just not true. The first thing that the Black Panther Party did, of course, in Oakland was to patrol the community, to set up an armed patrol in order to ensure that black people were not harassed and intimidated by the local police department. But that had been done in the South. It was done in Birmingham. My father participated in armed patrols because they had to protect the community. They'd get out every night in shifts, of course, with their weapons, and they'd drive around the community to make sure there weren't any strange races there to bomb, because they bombed houses all over. That's, as I've said on numerous occasions, my earliest childhood memories are bound up with the sounds of dynamite. People get very upset when they hear that black people have weapons or own weapons. And it's so hypocritical because they fail to realize the very real things which force black people to arm themselves. Something that a lot of people perhaps are not aware of is the fact that W.E. Du Bois, who was the greatest American black scholar and teacher, and he was also a member of the Communist Party towards the end of his life. He carried a gun all his life. He carried a shotgun in the South, and he carried a pistol all of his life.
It may be true that it was necessary for him to carry a gun, and you might well have needed a bodyguard of black armed men. But you're in prison, and other black leaders are now in prison. Does that mean that the center of black radicalism is the prison?
I don't know exactly what you mean by black radicalism being centered in the prisons. The problem is that, of course, everything is intertwined in this society. Nothing is really isolated from anything else, and certainly can't separate the movement inside the prisons from the black liberation movement, which has been evolving over years and years and years. There came a point where the revolutionary forces at work in the black community began to express themselves in jails and prisons. However, unlike, say, the campuses, unlike any other area in the society, even the armed forces, the room for any kind of meaningful political activity is so narrow that obviously as soon as the prison officials became aware of what was happening, they would confront these new developments with the most devastating kind of repression imaginable. And this is why when I was involved in all of the problems at UCLA surrounding my membership in the Communist Party, and when I was fighting for my job, I had just become aware of what was happening in the prisons, and I always insisted that people who were supporting me in my fight to retain my job, regardless of what my political beliefs and political activities were, had to look at the prison. Around that time at Soledad Prison, there were what I call, and what most people in the prison movement call, political assassinations, which there were 3 men who were known to be political activists in Soledad, and for no apparent reason at all, they were shot down, killed, murdered. I felt that they had been killed because of their political activities, because of their political beliefs. The Soledad brothers George Jackson, Pleated Rumgo, John Clichy were indicted shortly after that for the murder of Ricard. That also was an instance of the ruthless retaliation that the prison officials would resort to in order to stifle a developing movement inside the prison.
By linking this to your own troubles as a professor and to the lives of others in society outside the prisons, what you're really saying, it seems to me, is that the prison is a crystallized expression of everything that you see as ruthless within the capitalist structure. And there is no give anywhere.
Well, I think it was Dostoevsky who said that you can generally determine what the nature of any given society is by taking a look at its prisons. I think that is a very fitting way to understand what American society is all about today. However, I would not say that there is no room for change inside the prisons.
Yes, I was just going to ask you, you see, in response to that, about your own position, because many blacks, and I think particularly of George Jackson, many blacks have seen the situation the same way and have said that the guards or the men who have power in society outside really represent a fascist force, and that America is a fascist society. Now, you have quite pointedly disagreed with that. You still seem to be, even though you see the prisons having this central role in capitalist America, you still seem to be in the position of what I might call tentative negotiation. You have not decided that America is fascist.
Well, you see, you're right in one sense and you're wrong in another sense. I think that we are closer to fascism than we've ever been before. However, I would not say that this is a fascist society for one very, very important reason, and that is that in my opinion, at least, according to the study that I've done on fascism, according to my analysis of past fascist states and the dynamics of fascism in general, fascism is something which moves and develops and eventually consolidates itself. Once it consolidates itself, it can no longer be torn down from the inside. It can no longer be destroyed internally. And if you look at history, you see that there is not one example of a fascist country having undergone a revolution once it reached the point of consolidation.
Well, if from your point of view there's been no such consolidation of forces, how would you analyze the current positions taken by black radicals and black revolutionaries?
You see, my analysis of what a revolution is all about differs from others' analysis. Some people would say that what you have to do is sharpen the contradictions to the point where everything is completely polarized, where you have a totally fascist state on the other hand, on the one hand rather, and then because you have this very intense repressive fascist society, you're automatically going to have resistance on the other hand. But that's just not true. That's just not historically true. Of course, people might feel emotionally prepared to resist if they see that things have worsened to that degree. But the objective situation just will not allow them to do it. If you look at Germany, it's really tragic to see all of the efforts and attempts at resistance which fail because there was no longer any real room to organize a mass movement. Of course, there was room for individual acts. There were things such as assassinations and so forth and so on, but that couldn't break the fascist society.
But surely one of the reasons the radicals see the movement in such drastic terms is that the movement seems to have collapsed. It seems to have been sapped of all energy.
people fail to realize what the dynamics of a revolutionary struggle are in the first place. Certainly, when you consider the protracted character of revolution, you can't expect the very same levels to continue to exist at any given moment on that whole long continuum. There are going to be periods where there's very intense activity of this form, other periods where there appears to be a lull, often where you have the appearance of a lull that might simply be the moment of regrouping and regathering the kinds of forces that are going to give rise to something much greater and much stronger afterwards. Look at Attica. Of course, the population at Attica was overwhelmingly black and Puerto Rican, but there were also white prisoners there, white prisoners who felt as strongly about the need to give vent to their protests as the black prisoners did, and they were able to forge a really solid, beautiful unity among themselves. In something which always struck me was an incident that involved George Jackson and the Soledad brothers at Soledad prison. Apparently, some of the white prisoners who had been members of this organization called the Aryan Brotherhood, there was a huge reactionary strain among the white prisoners in Soledad. And it was provoked, of course, by the guards. The guards used that to do their dirty work. On one occasion, the guards let George out with a white Nazi prisoner, someone who called himself a Nazi, who was proud of his Nazism, in order to provoke a confrontation so that, well, you know what they do in prisons. George, when he found himself alone on the tier with this white Nazi, instead of going up and involving himself in a fight, extended his hand to him. And that was really the beginning of very widespread attempts in that area of Soledad to get rid of the racism, to convince and persuade the white prisoners that they were victims of that Nazism which the guards were trying to thrust upon them. And by the time the Soledad brothers were moved to San Quentin, the most incredible thing occurred. There was a unanimous show of solidarity among the white prisoners and the black prisoners and the Chicano prisoners as well. There was a hunger strike when they were transferred to demonstrate the overwhelming solidarity they felt with the Soledad brothers.
That solidarity may well be there among the prisoners, but there are many who take satisfaction in the way black trials have worked out. And I think of Bobby Seale, Huey Newton, the New York 13. All were eventually freed, and many think that, therefore, justice was done.
Well, to tell the truth, I was really incredulous when I read the New York Times editorial dealing with that, saying that the American system of justice is still what it has always been, is still the keystone of the American democracy and all of that. But there were 13 individuals, 13 men and women, who, most of whom had been in jail continuously for 2 years. There was Afeni Shakur, who had been forced to live in the New York Women's House of Detention while she was pregnant, living along with the rats and the roaches and everything else there. It just seems to me that anyone would be really foolish to attempt to maintain that the New York 21 were the recipients of justice when they had 2 years wrested from their lives. Think of what they could have done during those 2 years. Think of the work that they could have done in New York. Think of all of the contributions they could have made to the struggle, to their communities. This is why this is the real nature of the political trial, I think. And it really doesn't matter so much in the end whether the person is Of course, it matters in one sense. It's very important for us to get as many acquittals as we can. But in a sense, the repression has already run its course because the state has succeeded in silencing, more or less, sisters and brothers who are leaders in our struggle.
Well, I suppose as far as you're concerned, then it's no surprise that you're in solitary confinement, and I'm wondering what kind of shock that has been to your sensibilities, to your emotions.
Yeah, but see, I understood very well that the reason why the Marin County officials would not permit me to talk to any other woman in that jail was because they wanted to break me. They wanted me to respond in that way. They wanted me to feel the burden of the solitude. And I just had to make up my mind that I was not going to let it affect me that way.
But are you suggesting that really you are no different now than you were when you first came in?
Well, let me put it this way. I think that what George Jackson said about life in prison is very appropriate here. He says that prison either breaks a person or makes the person stronger. And I would like to think that I have become stronger during this experience.
Could I ask you if you've directly confronted the fact that if you are convicted, it is a question of your life?
Well, when I decided that I was going to devote my life primarily to the struggle for the liberation of black people and to the struggle for socialism, I decided at that point, I suppose, that my life belonged to that struggle and to my people. Anyone who makes a commitment, the kind of commitment that will impel him or her to continuously engage in the liberation struggle has to be aware of what the risks are.